So thank you very much, Charles, for coming along and agreeing to answer some questions. I'd like to start by talking about how you went about writing the biography. So obviously you spoke to a vast number of people, consulted lots of documents. How did you go about structuring and deciding which information to include? And were you able to draw on some of your experiences as a journalist?
Yes, the problem of telling such a story is you have to do two contradictory things. One is you have to explain that for the Prime Minister, everything happens at once and it can be completely disparate. So you could have, let's say, a terrorist bomb, a run on the pound, a by-election, and a strike all on the same day. And the Prime Minister has to deal with all of it. So you want to convey the mixture. But on the other hand, there are some big themes that are so important, you have to pursue them separately, like the miners' strike, the Cold War. And so it's very hard to structure the narrative, because you want that chronology, you want the mix, but sometimes you must just concentrate. And there's no right answer to this. And it's particularly hard in this volume, the second volume, because you're dealing with the middle of her government. At the beginning, you could do the relatively simple story of her rise to power, and at the end, you can do the great big single narrative of her fall. But in the middle, you have all these strands to marry.
Thank you. How did you overcome the challenge of producing a biography of someone that you reported on as an editor, and also you agree with and disagree with politically?
Well, I think in fact, I think it's an advantage, because I sort of knew where the bodies were buried, if you know what I mean. If you're a historian, an academic historian, you have many advantages, but obviously you have the disadvantage that you have not taken part, in some sense, in this world. And therefore you won't quite have that sort of feel for it. And also that you probably won't know the people. I mean, I knew 90% of the people I've interviewed before I interviewed them. Also, a sufficient amount of time had elapsed that I think it's important that I didn't have what you might call a dog in the fight. I didn't owe Mrs. Thatcher. I hadn't worked for her. She didn't pay me anything. I was sympathetic to her, but my career was not riding on hers when she had one. Do you see what I mean? So I didn't feel this was a problem.
Okay. Talking about how she was as a Prime Minister, could you explain some of the traits that she had that summed up her time as Prime Minister, and how have the traits to make a successful politician changed since she was Prime Minister? She had some bad traits. One was not very good at dealing with cabinet colleagues. Another, which is surprising, is that she was incredibly indecisive until she did decide, and then she was adamantine once she had decided. But she was always going all over the place until she'd decided. And of course, in some people's minds, she was divisive in her style, though I would argue that it was on the whole necessary to be that, given what she was trying to do. Her strengths were that she was clearly brave and a very good preacher as well. She rather unusually combined preaching with doing. She was very keen on action, but she also was good at the message. She never forgot the message. And she also had star quality, so she knew how to sort of fill the room, attract the lights, attract the attention. And perhaps the biggest thing is that she never gave up. So she had this, what Ferdinand, who worked for her, called the angry will. Always the angry will. And this animated everything that happened for 11 and a half years. And as soon as she left Whitehall lost the sense of the angry will, and therefore the machine didn't know what it was supposed to be doing anymore. And these are very powerful leadership qualities. And the other one I would mention is cunning, because she always sold herself as a conviction politician, and she was, but she was also a very cunning one. And part of her cunning was not to admit that she was cunning. Oh. Would you say politicians nowadays display sort of similar traits?
Well, I think they live more in the moment. They don't have sufficient self-confidence and belief to have a strong sense of direction. Very characteristic of the period that people sort of knew what Margaret Thatcher wanted even before she suggested it, because they knew the way she was thinking about things. And that gave it a sort of impetus and momentum. And I think that's on the whole lacking now.